What kind of man leaves behind a life of comfort, a rising career in the church, and the green hills of his homeland, to walk alone into lands where the old gods still demanded blood? What force of will carries a monk deep into dark Germanic forests, axe in hand, to stand before a tree that a whole people believed was sacred to their thunder god, and swing? And when the tree fell and no lightning came, what happened to a continent still teetering between the ancient world and the new? This is the story of Saint Boniface, the English monk who became the apostle of Germany and whose work helped shape the Christian soul of Europe itself. He was born around the year 675 in the green southwest of England in a place called Crediton in Devonshire, and his parents named him Winfrid. England in those years was a land recently turned toward the gospel, still warm from the missionary fire that Augustine of Canterbury had lit a few generations before. The church there was young, fervent, and full of a spirit that longed to carry the faith beyond its own shores. Winfrid grew up breathing that air. From early childhood, something in him burned with unusual clarity. When he was still a small boy, a group of traveling monks visited his father's home, and the conversations he overheard at the table lodged themselves permanently in his heart. The monastery, they said, was not a hiding place. It was a launching ground. His father had other plans for him, a worldly career, a comfortable inheritance, and resisted, but Winfrid was immovable. He entered the Benedictine monastery at Nursling, near Southampton, and never looked back. At Nursling, he proved himself a scholar of rare quality, studying scripture, mastering Latin, and eventually composing the first Latin grammar ever written in England. His fellow monks loved him. His abbot trusted him completely. When the time came to choose a new abbot to lead the community, the monks voted for Winfrid, and the honor was his for the taking. He declined it. He had heard, in prayer, something he could not unhear. Out beyond the Channel, in the vast forested regions that stretched across what are now Germany and the Low Countries, entire peoples still knelt before wooden idols, still offered sacrifice beneath sacred oaks, still lived without a single bishop to guide them, or a single organized church to anchor them. Whatever Christianity had once existed there had long since withered into confusion or been swallowed back by the old ways. Winfrid could not lead a quiet monastery while that world remained in darkness. In 716, he left for the continent for the first time, heading toward Frisia, and the mission that would consume the rest of his life had begun. His first journey did not succeed. Radbod, king of the Frisians, was openly hostile to Christian missionaries, and the political situation made sustained preaching impossible. Winfrid returned to England, resumed his duties at Nursling, and waited. But the waiting was itself a kind of preparation. He understood now that missionary work in those lands required something more than individual zeal. It required the full weight of the Roman Church behind it. In 718, he set out again, this time traveling first to Rome. Pope Gregory II received him with interest and questioned him at length about his intentions, his theology, his understanding of church discipline. Satisfied with what he found, the Pope gave Winfrid a formal commission to preach among the pagans of the Germanic lands under the direct authority of the Holy See. It was a mandate unlike anything a single missionary had carried into that world before. And with it came something else, a new name. Gregory renamed him Boniface after an early Roman martyr, a name that carried the meaning of one who does good. That name was not incidental. It was an act of identity. Winfrid, the English monk, was becoming something larger, a representative of the universal church, a man whose work would belong not to one nation or one monastery, but to the whole body of Christendom. He left Rome carrying that commission like a torch and made his way into Germany. What he found there confirmed everything he had heard from afar. Pockets of nominal Christianity existed, but clergy who had never been properly ordained were performing sacraments. Bishops operated without any connection to Rome or to one another. Converts had slipped quietly back into pagan practices, layering old rites beneath Christian names. The church was not simply weak in many places. It had ceased to exist in any recognizable form. Boniface got to work. By the early 720s, Boniface had been working in the German lands long enough to understand what held the people back. Paganism there was not simply a set of beliefs. It was woven into the landscape itself. Sacred groves, sacred hills, sacred springs. The world was alive with the presence of the old gods. And nowhere more dramatically than at Geismar, in the region of Hesse, where a massive oak tree stood that the local people venerated as the dwelling place of Donar, the Germanic thunder god, known to others as Thor. The tree was ancient and enormous. It had stood, according to the account left by Boniface's biographer Willibald, for generations beyond counting, and its girth was such that it commanded reverence simply by its size. To fell, it was unthinkable. The god would strike down any man who raised an axe to it. Everyone believed this, even some of the Christians in the surrounding countryside, who hedged their bets by honoring both the cross and the oak. Boniface announced that he would cut it down. His companions were afraid. The local Franks who held political authority in the area watched with a mix of nervousness and curiosity. The pagans gathered, certain that what was about to happen would end in lightning and death. Boniface raised the axe and began to cut. Willibald's account records that when the great tree finally gave way, a mighty wind arose and sent it crashing to the ground, where it split into 4 sections. No lightning came, no voice from the sky, only silence and the fallen oak. Boniface used the wood from Donar's oak to build a small chapel on the same spot, dedicating it to St. Peter. The act was complete. Not just the destruction of a symbol, but its transformation. Where the old god had been honored, the name of Christ would now be spoken. The effect on the surrounding population was immediate and widespread. What no amount of preaching had fully accomplished, that single act of embodied courage began to break open. The felling of the oak was a moment, but the life of Boniface was a sustained labor of decades, and it was the slower work that mattered most. Pope Gregory III, who succeeded Gregory II, sent Boniface the pallium in 731, naming him Archbishop and Metropolitan of all Germany east of the Rhine, with authority to establish dioceses and consecrate bishops throughout the region. The commission was extraordinary, and Boniface spent the years that followed making it real. He founded dioceses at Würzburg, Erfurt, Eichstätt, and elsewhere, giving the scattered communities of Christians an institutional backbone they had never had. He summoned synods, gathering the clergy to confront abuses, enforce discipline, and reconnect the German Church to Rome. Bishops who had operated in isolation or corruption found themselves called to account. The Church in Germany was not merely growing, it was being organized, diocese by diocese, synod by synod, into something that could endure. He also founded monasteries, and the greatest of these was Fulda, established in 744 inches a deep forest valley in what is now central Germany. He entrusted its leadership to his Bavarian disciple Sturmi, who had found the site after weeks of searching through the wilderness on a donkey. Fulda became a center of learning and prayer that would outlast Boniface by centuries, and it remains a living place of pilgrimage to this day. His body still resting there in a Baroque sarcophagus beneath the great cathedral. Boniface did not work alone. He drew missionaries from England, men and women alike, writing letters home with requests for books, for helpers, for prayers. Among those who answered were his cousin Leoba, who became the abbess of Bischofsheim and was known throughout the region for her learning and sanctity, and Walburga, who led a monastic community at Heidenheim. These women were not peripheral figures. They were essential architects of the church that was slowly taking shape across the German lands. He also maintained a remarkable correspondence with the popes of his era and with church leaders across Europe, and those letters have survived. They reveal a man of intense seriousness, at times impatient, always precise, who understood that what he was doing was not simply converting individuals, but constructing the foundations of a Christian civilization. He did not speak the language of sentiment. He spoke the language of responsibility. Not everyone welcomed what Boniface was building. Reform, by its nature, makes enemies, and Boniface made his share. Clergy who had grown comfortable in their irregularities found themselves confronted by a man who would not look away. There was the case of Adalbert, a wandering Frankish bishop who claimed personal visions, distributed his own nail clippings as relics, and drew large popular followings with a charisma that substituted for doctrine. There was Clement, a priest teaching positions on marriage and the afterlife that contradicted church teaching. Boniface brought both cases before a synod, had them condemned, and appealed their cases to Rome. The Frankish nobility, whose support he needed for political protection, did not always share his vision. Charles Martel, the powerful Frankish mayor of the palace, had backed Boniface's early missions. But Charles was also a man who appointed bishops as political rewards and saw the church partly as a tool of Frankish power. After Charles's death, his sons Carloman and Pippin proved more genuinely sympathetic to reform, and with them Boniface held several major church councils in the 740s that pushed discipline and order deeper into the Frankish church as a whole. But every step of this work cost him something. Letters survive, in which he describes his exhaustion, his frustration with obstacles, his sense that the work was always incomplete. He wrote to the Archbishop of Canterbury asking for prayers, describing himself as a man who feared he had labored much and accomplished little. Those who knew him did not share that assessment. The men he trained, the dioceses he structured, the monasteries he founded were already outlasting his doubts. In 747, Boniface resigned from the Archbishopric of Mainz, handing authority to his disciple Lull. He was past 70 years old. He had given 30 years to the German mission. A lesser man would have rested. He returned to Frisia. Frisia was where he had begun 40 years before and where Radbod's hostility had turned him back. The old king was long dead, and parts of Frisia had since come within the reach of the church, but large territories remained pagan, and it was there, among that resistant population, that Boniface chose to spend whatever remained of his life. He set out in 754 at the age of nearly 80, traveling down the Rhine with a company that the sources number variously at between 50 and more than 100, including priests, monks, deacons, and servants. The journey itself was an act of deliberate return. He had told those close to him that he wished to end his life where he had begun his mission. He carried with him a funeral shroud. He had, it seems, understood what the journey meant. The mission made progress. Converts came forward, and Boniface arranged for a gathering near the River Bourne, at a place called Dokkum on the eve of Pentecost, where he would administer the sacrament of confirmation to a group of newly baptized Christians. That morning, as he waited by his tent, with the scriptures open before him, the sound of horses and armed men rose from the surrounding countryside. The gathering that arrived was not the one he had expected. A hostile band of Frisians, opposed to the missionary presence in their lands, overran the camp. The accounts record that Boniface forbade his companions to resist, telling them that the day they had long anticipated had arrived and that they should not repay evil with evil. He was cut down where he stood, along with his companions. The precise number martyred that day differs across the sources, ranging from a few dozen to more than 50. What the sources agree on is the manner of his death: calm, without resistance, beside his open book. When the Christians who had scattered returned to the site, they found his body lying near a blood-stained copy of the scriptures. His remains were carried first to Utrecht, then by ship to the monastery he had founded at Fulda, where he had asked to be buried. The monks received him with lament and with joy, for he had died as he had lived, entirely given. The feast day of Saint Boniface is celebrated on the 5th of June, and in Germany it is observed not as the feast of a foreign import, but as something native to the land, because in a very real sense it is. The church that Boniface built its dioceses, its monasteries, its synodal structures, its deep connection to Rome became the institutional skeleton on which German Christianity grew for the next millennium and beyond. Every year, the German bishops still hold one of their 2 annual assemblies at Fulda, at the tomb of the man who organized them into a church. He is remembered in England too, though less prominently, And the contrast says something worth noting. Boniface left England to serve another country. He gave the best decades of his life, not to his own people, but to strangers who spoke different languages and worshiped different gods. His legacy, therefore, belongs most to those who received him. What he offers to us, across all the centuries, is the image of a faith that does not wait for favorable conditions. Boniface went where the need was greatest, not where the welcome was warmest. He built structures that would outlast him, not for the sake of legacy, but because he understood that what lasts serves people he would never meet. He confronted error without cruelty and corruption without compromise. He wrote when he was exhausted. He traveled when he was old. He died with scripture in his hands and an open camp around him, waiting to celebrate Pentecost. His life is an answer to the question that every person of faith eventually faces, the question of whether what we do in quiet faithfulness actually matters. Boniface did not have the comfort of seeing the full fruit of his work. He saw dioceses still struggling, reforms still resisted, pagan groves still standing in distant valleys. He kept going anyway, trusting that the one who had called him was building something larger than he could see. The oak at Geismar fell. The chapel built from its wood became a church. The church became a faith. And the faith became Europe. It began with one man who believed that it was worth picking up the axe